Hello friends, and welcome back to the Ambassadors of Gaming channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to do something that I would like to call devil's advocacy. We're going to take an idea that is great for corporate greed but terrible for us as consumers. So let's take a look at how Call of Duty could be monetized to an even more ridiculous extent. If you've been in the gaming scene for a while now, you know that Call of Duty releases every year, $60 price point. Along with it comes its obligatory $50 season pass, and along with it as well comes the microtransactions and loot boxes. This is something that's just familiar now with Call of Duty players. Not a surprise, not a shocker. What I would like to do is instead take a look at how Activision could break this series up even more, to a point where it might actually be useful for us as consumers, but mainly to make them more money.
We've seen that in recent times.
Companies are attempting to move into the, quote, live services or games as a service. Which, if you don't know, essentially means that they want to make a game that keeps players continually engaged and cuts down significantly on development costs and marketing by not having to release a new game every year or every other year with the same coat of paint. We've seen this with Rainbow Six Siege being one of the best examples. Siege is now on its third season of DLC and it still has an active player base, still a growing player base. Call of Duty has a similar trend, releases in the fall, most of the players fall off before DLC 1 even releases, and then continue to leave until the next Call of Duty gets announced, then falls down further and further over the years. And this turns out to be kind of a massive waste of resources on Activision's part. Now, of course, this idea is just in theory, but in theory, my idea would be an evolution, a sort of Frankenstein creation of how Siege and Wizards' Magic the Gathering game, Magic Duels, has truly turned them into platforms, games as services, by having a consistent flow of content in different game modes. Let's first start with pricing and then move on to content. So the idea would be that each mode would be roughly $30 per year, with updates as follows with or without a season pass. So let's take a look at the campaign first. I truly believe that Activision could keep this model the same as it is now and use this as a way to iterate on each, quote, season. They could do so by using it as the introduction to the new season by releasing it before the multiplayer section and showcase the weapons and skills that may be used in the multiplayer that year. For multiplayer, the way I believe this would work with Activision's current model, not my wish for it, my pie in the sky model, for example. I believe that after the release of the new COD campaign every year, the multiplayer could update with a new, quote, mode, which would be the new season. This would simply be changing between different types of weaponry. For example, running Modern Warfare as it is, and then using World War II as a separate mode. Much like remastered collection menus and Magic's digital game. Being able to swap in between sets. Activision could charge $30 for the initial release of the application, the quote game, and then sell a season pass for each season at $30 to $50 for maps, extra content, or maybe have it be similar to Fortnite, where having a pass that unlocks cosmetic items over the season. Of course, the second most famous Call of Duty mode is the Zombies/Horde mode. This mode would act again very similar to multiplayer, charge an initial fee, then charge for a season pass that includes maps, maybe new modes. This would again lead to another $30 initial charge and a reoccurring season pass at $30 to $50. Same rules would essentially apply here. Every time a new season rolls around, it acts as its own game with its own guns, maps, and quirky things, while leaving the previous seasons intact, the previous maps intact. The current business model is every Call of Duty player buys the base game at $60 in US dollars. A portion of the Call of Duty players buy the season pass and or some variation of the deluxe and or collector's edition. So let's theoretically state that all copies of the game are sold at standard pricing and do not include the season pass. As I could last find via Statista.com, was that World War II sold 12.19 million copies overall. That is $73.14 million. Gross. Does Activision need to make more money after that? Probably not. So that is the rough gross numbers based off of what we have. Unfortunately, Activision doesn't release statistics on its game modes, so let us work with an assumption. Let's say most of the player base focuses on multiplayer, then Zombies Horde mode, and then the campaign. For our experiment, let's just say that 60% of the player base plays all three modes on every Call of Duty, while 30% plays one and 10% play two modes and never touch the third. So roughly we're looking at these kind of numbers. Players are engaged in all three modes, 7.314 million. Players engaged in one mode, 3.657 million. Players engaged in two modes, 1.219 million. The people over at Activision aren't stupid, so I'm sure they've thought of this, but are approaching it as if it's not broke, don't fix it. Activision has stated they're willing to run Call of Duty into the ground, so we'll have to see if they adjust in the coming years. But I believe that Call of Duty has more than what it's being used for at the moment, and I think that there are game modes that could be utilized better than they are currently being utilized, as we're seeing here with Black Ops 4. There's no campaign, reportedly, while they're swapping over resources to help work on multiplayer zombies and then including a battle royale mode. So I think instead what Activision should maybe do is instead relocate the resources to having the studios focus on one thing in particular. Have one studio do one thing in particular, or rotate the studios every year as you normally would, but have them rotate in between game modes instead of having them rotate in between games. That way the workload would be significantly less on each developer, and it may be easier for them, and they might be able to actually churn out more content in the long run. Anyways, that is my pitch. I would love to hear what you guys think about it. Please leave a comment, let us know. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, blah blah blah, all of that. Ambassador Gaming everywhere. And hopefully we will see you in the next one.